Welcome to episode 27 of Downloadable Brain. I'm your guy, Brain44, and I gotta say, as much as I love the sound of my own voice, just a little bit less each day. Somehow, some way, people just love what they can potentially gain off of me by choosing to bother me and abuse their power at my expense. So why is that? Somebody feels overly entitled. Somebody has done far too much to hold me back, but they also want everything I have ever worked for. And I would just like to start out by saying I call judgment on all people out there who feel entitled to my energy, the star power that I have, and my potential to earn, as well as what I'm currently building. Nobody has my permission, so if somebody ever thought, for example, that as an indie artist who is not signed to a record label, that they could somehow become the person who has access to what I'm doing, they would be sadly mistaken, because under my current distributor, there's an agreement between the distributor that I have and the music platforms they upload to. And that agreement basically says that I have access to all the rights of my music and nobody else does, and that I get all the earnings from whatever streams bring in. So it would be a false sense of entitlement and an abuse of power from somebody pulling a string that they had no business pulling, if that was ever the case. So I not only call judgment on the individual or group of people who would allow that to go on, I personally demand that the person behind it be banished from ever having access to any music I release at all, also including any podcasts that I upload. With that being said, I just want to title today's episode, What is Mine is Mine. So what does that mean? Well, everything I just said is mine because this is something I have built and something nobody else has the rights to access. But it goes a little bit deeper than that. People also get to know and understand the difficult life that I've had and the challenges I've had to face. And I've faced a lot of betrayals. I've had to endure a lot of hardships throughout my life. But they don't just feel entitled to my music project and my podcast. They really think that it is socially acceptable, ethical, and appropriate to write books based off of my story. And somebody out there is planning this as we speak, or might even have already done it. So I would just like to personally call judgment on each and every person who feels that false sense of entitlement to write a story about me or my life, as well as having access to any of my music or podcasts. And I call upon Spirit to personally banish each and every person who has that false sense of entitlement. I plan on living a long and happy life like that one dude who lived to be 100. That's the law of assumption I'm choosing to speak. And I often think the law of assumption works better when it comes directly from the heart. When you're spiritually connected to a higher power and you're just not under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Because when you get your mind clean, you can really use your spiritual awakening to tap in, and you're just totally tapped in, like in the right state of mind. I have seen people use the law of assumption to say some dumb shit before, but when you look at them, they could potentially be under the influence of some white powder or who knows what else. I'm glad I don't do drugs or alcohol at all, because ever since I gave up on drinking and smoking pot a long time ago, I've grown and developed a greater connection with spirituality, as well as became a lot more confident, self-aware, and talented. And it's like the more people would attack me and try to hold on to my time, energy, and money, the stronger I would become. They may have successfully gotten something for the time being, but I truly believe it's not going to last. So I absolutely call judgment having the angels, ancestors, and entire spirit realm to rain down vengeance, justice, and fury upon anybody who dares try to turn my life into a book, turn my life into a movie, or take on the responsibility of my music or my podcast. Not a single one of them have my permission to do it, and I personally would like to banish all of them from getting that done. And I call Spirit to also cast judgment on them if they feel entitled. I believe that what is fair, so if there's money to be made, then I should be making money. And I call judgment upon everybody who downplays my abilities and they take my energy to capitalize off of it and they feel entitled to what I have or what I'm currently building. I not only forbid anyone from having access to anything I create at all, I demand it in the name of justice, honor, and artistic integrity that nobody can ever have access to anything I do. I will never become an actor. I will most likely not assemble a live band. I probably won't play shows. I just like to record music and do podcasts. Sometimes other content related to spirituality as well, but I call judgment upon anybody and everybody who dares try to take what is mine. I forbid them to do it, and I request that anyone out there who is aware of somebody abusing their power, sit that person down in the position of power and make them understand that this is simply not theirs. They don't have the rights, they don't have the permission, and they may have money or be able to pull some strings, but the difference between you and I is that I didn't sign the same kind of contracts you sign with your groups of people who you roll with, and I don't plan on doing so, so I absolutely call judgment. As a man who uses the law of assumption to say I'll live to be 100, I also just want to tell my audience that I don't give anybody at all permission to ever take out any insurance policies under my name, and I am also choosing to decide that I never want to become an organ donor, and I've never signed anything saying that I did want to, and I never will. So I also call judgment upon anybody who may have attempted to ever forge my signature to make it look like I would have potentially agreed to do anything like that. And I call judgment on anybody who has insurance policies out of my name or may be potentially using my identity for anything else. I refuse to give anybody permission to any of my music or podcasts. I refuse to give anybody permission to write stories about me, and I refuse to give permission to anybody to do things under my name. And since they do not have that permission, they can't do it. That's the artist telling whoever feels entitled that it's a no, and spirit says no, and the universe says no. You can't have anything I'm building, and you don't have ownership over anything I'm creating. Now, if I ever signed a record label to a record label, it would be a different story, I guess, right? Because when we agree to record contracts with business partners, then there's an equal split usually between the partnership, but they don't have my permission. Nobody has my permission to do it, and nobody has access to it. But I call judgment on anybody and everybody who takes anything I post to use it for themselves when they do not have my permission to use what I'm doing. I banish anybody from having access to what it is that I am doing, because what is mine, and nobody has my permission to access it. I mean, it's crazy that we would have to even say that out loud, but I know some people out there use platforms like Facebook and Instagram, as well as even music platforms such as Spotify and Apple Music. And I mean, I use music platforms, but there's only one of me. My official artist name is Spiritual Advisor, and I've released one album so far on all major music platforms. I totally opted out of using Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, so that only really leaves us with YouTube Music outside of the other platforms. It's just a warning that anybody else pretending to be me anywhere else is not actually me, and they don't have my permission to do that. I would like to personally call judgment at this time on those who feel entitled to do so. And I also feel the need to call judgment on people who may potentially use my information or picture with online dating apps. Because I used to use online dating apps, but I never ended up actually meeting up with anyone, and I just decided that it's not for me. At this point, I just want to warn my audience or anybody else that may encounter somebody claiming to be me that it's not actually me. I'm not using any dating apps anymore, and I've decided to entirely throw in the towel regarding online dating. So just be mindful of that when you're talking to somebody, because if they claim to be me, they're not me, and I call judgment on them for that. That's how we claim it, baby. What's mine is mine. So you don't own my music, you don't own my podcasts, You don't have rights to access it, and choosing to do so is breaching the agreement between my distributor and the agreements they have with all major music platforms. Since that agreement means that I just pay a small fee to have the rights and access to all of my own music and earnings. But I call judgment on anybody and everybody who thinks that they're entitled to abuse that power. So what did we learn today, audience? I'm going to be 100 years old when I check out. Nobody's going to take me down because I'm living happily and peacefully. And I'm a non-organ donor who doesn't give anybody permission to take out any insurance policies under my name, or be able to write books about my life, or have access to any of my music or any of my podcasts. And they also have no right to pretend to be me on other platforms, including this one. But for those of you who need a reminder, my YouTube channel is Spiritual Advisor Official, and it's the only one. Anybody else claiming to be me is not me, so just be mindful of that. I call judgment on anybody who feels entitled to pretend to be me. You don't have my permission to write a story. You don't have my permission to have an insurance policy. You don't have my permission to use my music. And you don't have my permission to have the rights to my Downloadable Brain podcast. I call judgment on anybody and everybody who feels entitled to having what is mine, or building off of what I'm building. Because my decision is final and nobody else has access. What is mine, and I'm sorry for the weird episode, guys. I just thought I needed to make my intentions clear so that if anybody tries to pull the okie dokie over me and capitalize off of my work, that they don't have my permission. And if the Canadian government wants to, they're welcome to bring the hammer down on those who try to do it. So, just a run through of what I said today. I'm not an organ donor. I don't have my name on anybody's insurance policy willingly. And if they did, then they forged my signature. So that's just something to consider. And I don't want anybody else having access to my money because I haven't agreed to any of that. And nobody has my permission to anything I do with what I'm building, nor will they ever. If they try to do so, I call judgment, and I welcome people to sit them down and make them understand that you can try to stick your hand out in the pot regarding me, but it doesn't belong to you in the first place. This was a good episode. Let's end it there. And remember, even though I plan on living to be a happy old man of about 100 years old, if I ever kick the bucket before 100, I don't leave anything I have to anybody in my family, or anybody that they're associated with in my family, or any of my former friends. I don't leave it to anybody, and nobody has my permission. None of them have my permission to have it. So I just needed to make that clear before I sign off from today's episode. Brain44 signing out. Until next time, what's mine is mine, and don't you ever forget it. Rock on.